when a boxing legend becomes a witness to innocent suffering, the world gets to see the true measure of a champion. It was supposed to be just another evening for Manny Pacquiao, who'd stepped into a busy KFC after a long day of training. The Filipino boxing icon wasn't looking for attention, baseball cap pulled low, trying to blend in with the crowd as he waited in line to place his order. But fate had other plans that evening, orchestrating a moment that would reveal the heart behind the heavyweight titles. What happened next would not only change the lives of two little sisters forever, but would also show the world a side of Manny that few had witnessed outside the ring. If you've ever wondered what makes a true hero, this story might just answer that question. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in the power of kindness. Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories of celebrities making a difference. And leave a comment sharing your thoughts on what makes Manny Pacquiao special beyond his boxing career. The bustling KFC restaurant was filled with the usual dinner crowd, families chatting over buckets of chicken, teenagers laughing in corners, and tired workers grabbing a quick meal before heading home. Among them stood Manny Pacquiao, world-famous boxer and Filipino congressman, who despite his wealth and fame, still enjoyed the simple pleasure of fast food from time to time. He stood patiently in line, scrolling through his phone and occasionally glancing up at the menu board, completely unaware that his evening was about to take an unexpected turn. The staff hadn't recognized him yet, his modest demeanor and casual clothing offering him a rare moment of anonymity in his otherwise very public life. For Manny, these small moments of normalcy were precious, a chance to feel like everyone else, if only for a little while. But as he would soon discover, being everyone else sometimes means being in exactly the right place at the right time to make a difference. It was the soft sobbing that first caught his attention, barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise, but somehow cutting through everything else. Manny turned slightly, trying not to be obvious as he scanned the dining area to locate the source of the sound. In a corner booth sat two young girls, perhaps 7 and 9 years old, huddled together and speaking in hushed tones. The older one had her arm protectively wrapped around her little sister, who was wiping tears from her dirt-smudged face with a napkin that had clearly been used several times already. What struck Manny immediately was not just their obvious distress, but the state of their clothing, worn slightly too small, and not nearly warm enough for the evening chill that had settled outside. Their table was empty, save for a single small order of fries that they appeared to be sharing, taking careful, measured bites as if making each one last as long as possible. The boxer felt something shift in his chest as he watched them count out coins from a small plastic purse, clearly checking if they had enough for another item. Manny's mind raced back to his own childhood in General Santos City, where poverty had been his constant companion. He remembered all too well the gnawing pain of hunger, the shame of worn-out clothes, and the heavy responsibility that came with trying to help his family survive. At 13, he'd left home to work on the streets of Manila, sending whatever money he could back to his mother and siblings. The familiar ache of those memories washed over him as he watched the girls, seeing reflections of his own past in their careful rationing of food. He knew that look, the mixture of pride and desperation that came with trying to make do with almost nothing. Without thinking, Manny stepped out of the line, his order forgotten as he felt himself drawn toward their table. Something about these sisters spoke to him on a level beyond sympathy. It was recognition, a connection to struggles he understood all too well. The older sister noticed him approaching and immediately straightened, her body language shifting to protective mode as she pulled her younger sibling closer. This too was familiar to Manny, the wariness of strangers that children in difficult circumstances quickly learn. He stopped a respectful distance away, offering a gentle smile that he hoped would put them at ease. "Hi there," he said softly, careful not to draw attention from other diners. "I couldn't help noticing you two are here alone. Is everything okay?" The younger girl looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of recognition and disbelief, tugging urgently on her sister's sleeve and whispering something. The older sister hesitated, clearly torn between caution toward a stranger and the dawning realization of who was standing before them. For a moment, no one spoke, just three souls connected by circumstance in the unlikely setting of a fast food restaurant on an ordinary Tuesday evening. You're Manny Pacquiao," the older sister finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, as if saying it too loudly might make him disappear. Manny nodded, his smile widening slightly at the recognition, though celebrity was the furthest thing from his mind at that moment. But right now, I'm just someone who'd like to help if you need it." He gestured to the nearly empty tray between them. "Maybe I could get you both something more to eat." The younger girl's eyes lit up momentarily before she looked to her sister for permission, hope and hunger briefly overcoming her tears. The older sister bit her lip, that familiar pride fighting against necessity, another battle Manny recognized from his own childhood. "We don't need charity," she said with dignity beyond her years, though her voice wavered slightly. "Our mom is coming back soon." But there was something in the way she said it, a subtle uncertainty that told Manny this might not be entirely true. Manny nodded respectfully, understanding the importance of maintaining dignity even in difficult times. I understand, he said, pulling up a chair at a neighboring table and sitting down to bring himself to their eye level. When I was a boy in the Philippines, I was very proud too. Sometimes I wouldn't accept help even when I really needed it. He paused, watching as his words registered with the older sister. But you know what I learned? True strength isn't about facing everything alone, it's about having the courage to accept kindness when it's offered. The younger girl whispered something to her sister again, more urgently this time, and the older one seemed to be reconsidering. Manny waited patiently, not pushing, allowing them the space to make their own decision. He knew all too well that people in vulnerable positions often had their choices taken away from them. He wouldn't do that to these children, even with the best intentions. Our mom, the older sister began, then stopped, clearly struggling with whether to continue. Manny noticed how she protectively adjusted her sister's collar, covering what looked like a small bruise on her neck. She said she was going to work and would come back with dinner, but that was yesterday. The words tumbled out suddenly, as if she couldn't hold them back anymore. We waited at home all night, but she didn't come back. We found some money in a drawer this morning and thought we could get food here and wait. Her voice grew smaller with each word. People don't bother you if you have food on your table. The practical wisdom of this observation that a small purchase bought them hours of shelter and safety struck Manny deeply. He felt a surge of both admiration for their resourcefulness and sadness that such young children had to navigate these adult concerns. The younger sister, seeming relieved that the truth was finally out, added in a tiny voice, "We're scared to go home without Mom." That's a very difficult situation, and you've both been very brave. He leaned forward slightly, making sure to address both girls equally. Would it be okay if I ordered some proper dinner for you while we figure this out together? He was careful not to make promises he couldn't keep about finding their mother or solving all their problems. Life had taught him that such assurances often rang hollow when faced with complex realities. Instead, he offered what he could guarantee: food, safety, and a commitment not to abandon them. The younger sister nodded eagerly, but the older one still hesitated. "How do we know you really want to help us?" she asked, a lifetime of disappointments evident in her question. Manny respected her caution. It had probably protected both of them many times before. "That's a fair question," Manny acknowledged with a nod. "You don't know me, and you're smart to be careful." He thought for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Would it help if I called someone you might trust more? Maybe the police, or a social worker who could help us find your mom?" The mention of police caused both girls to tense visibly. The older sister shook her head quickly. "No police," she whispered. "Mom said they'll separate us if they find out we're alone." Manny understood their fear. Family separation was a legitimate concern in many child welfare situations, and clearly their bond, as sisters, was sustaining them through this crisis. "Okay," he agreed. "No police, right now. But we do need to find some help." He weighed his options carefully, aware that the wrong decision could make their situation worse, not better. What had started as a simple act of kindness was revealing itself to be much more complicated, requiring delicacy and wisdom beyond simply buying a meal. The younger sister suddenly tugged at her sister's sleeve again, and the older one leaned down to listen to another whispered confidence. After a moment, she straightened up, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and hope. "Emily wants to know." She started, then stopped, seemingly unsure how to continue. "It's okay," Manny encouraged gently. "You can ask me anything." The older sister took a deep breath. "She wants to know if you have enough money to buy the family bucket with extra biscuits." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Manny couldn't help but smile, the innocent practicality of children, focusing on immediate needs even in crisis. "I think I can manage that," he replied, his smile growing warmer. "And maybe some macaroni and cheese too. And dessert." As he spoke, he saw something precious begin to emerge on their faces. Trust, tentative but real. It was a gift he didn't take lightly. "My name is Manny," he said, offering his hand first to the older sister. "What's yours?" "She says you're proof that poor people can become something great." The simple statement hit Manny with unexpected force, a reminder of how his journey represented hope for so many families like theirs. "Your mom sounds wise," he said, emotion threatening to tighten his throat. "And she's right to be proud of you both. You've taken care of each other when things got tough. That shows real strength." He stood up, making sure to move slowly and predictably. "Now, how about I go order that food, and then while we eat, you can tell me a little more about your mom. Maybe together we can figure out how to help her too." The girls nodded, Emily with enthusiasm and Sophie with cautious hope. As Manny walked to the counter, already making mental notes of resources he could access to help this family beyond just tonight's meal. While waiting for their order, Manny discreetly made a phone call to his assistant, keeping his voice low and his eyes on the girls to ensure they didn't feel abandoned. "Cancel my evening appointments," he instructed. something important has come up. He briefly explained the situation, asking for information about local family support services and temporary safe housing options. As a public figure, Manny knew he had to be careful. His involvement would inevitably attract attention, which could either help or hurt, depending on how it was handled. He wasn't interested in publicity from this encounter. His concern was entirely for the well-being of these sisters and finding their mother. Years in the public eye had taught him how to navigate sensitive situations with discretion, and he was determined to protect Sophie and Emily's privacy while ensuring they received the help they needed. The cashier called his number, and Manny collected the large tray of food, feeling the weight of responsibility far heavier than the meal he carried. As he approached their table, Manny saw Emily's eyes widen at the feast he was bringing: chicken, sides, desserts, and large drinks. Sophie tried to maintain her composure, but he could see her swallow hard at the sight of so much food. "Here we go," he said cheerfully, setting down the tray and distributing the items. "Eat as much as you like. Food always tastes better when you're sharing it with friends." He sat down with them, taking only a small piece of chicken for himself to put them at ease about consuming the meal. As they began to eat carefully at first, then with increasing enthusiasm, Manny gently steered the conversation toward gathering more information. "Sophie, you mentioned your mom went to work yesterday. Where does she work?" he asked conversationally, trying to keep his tone light despite the seriousness of the situation. Sophie hesitated, looking down at her food. "Different places. Sometimes she cleans houses. Sometimes she works at the gas station near our apartment," Emily chimed in, "and sometimes she goes out at night for special jobs, but we're not supposed to talk about those." Sophie shook her head, her worry returning despite the comfort of a full meal. "Never overnight. She always comes home, even really late." She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, revealing another small bruise near her temple that Manny hadn't noticed before. He kept his expression carefully controlled, though inwardly his concern deepened. "Sophie, can I ask those bruises? Did someone hurt you and Emily?" The question was direct, but gentle, necessary to understand the full scope of their situation. Sophie's shoulders tensed, and she glanced quickly at her sister before answering. "Mom's boyfriend gets mad sometimes. Mom doesn't like it when he's around us, but sometimes she needs his help with money." "Thank you for telling me that," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "That's not okay, and it's not your fault, either of you." Emily had stopped eating and was watching Manny's face carefully, as if trying to gauge whether he was truly trustworthy with this information. He smiled at her, receiving a small, shy smile in return. "Your mom sounds like someone who works very hard to take care of you," he continued, redirecting the conversation slightly. "I'd like to help her do that, if I can. Do you have a phone number for her, or maybe an address where you live? Or the name of someone else your mom trusts who might know where she is?" She hesitated, then added, "Our neighbor, Miss Diane, sometimes watches us. She might know something." Manny made a mental note of the information, already forming a plan. First priority was ensuring the girls had a safe place for the night, ideally with someone they knew and trusted like this Miss Diane. Then resources could be mobilized to locate their mother, who might be in trouble herself. Throughout his career, Manny had built connections with community organizations, and now those networks could be put to good use. "You've been very helpful," he told the girls sincerely. "Now, let's figure out our next steps together." He was careful to include them in the planning, knowing how important it was not to simply take over and make decisions for them. As they finished their meal, Manny noticed Emily fighting to keep her eyes open, the combination of a full stomach and emotional exhaustion finally catching up with her. Sophie, ever vigilant, immediately adjusted her position to create a more comfortable place for her sister to lean. "She didn't sleep much last night," Sophie explained quietly. "We kept waiting for Mom to come home." Manny nodded in understanding. "You both must be exhausted. How about we find somewhere safe for you to rest properly?" By now, his assistant had texted back with information about local family support services, including an emergency contact who could help immediately. "I have a friend who helps families in tough situations," Manny explained, showing Sophie the information on his phone. "They can make sure you have a safe place to stay tonight, and they're really good at finding people. Would it be okay if I called them to help us find your mom?" Sophie studied the information, her young face serious with consideration. "Will they keep us together, me and Emily?" Sophie asked, the question revealing her deepest fear. Manny recognized that for these sisters, their bond was their lifeline, the one constant in an uncertain world. "I promise I'll make sure of it," he said firmly. "I won't let anyone separate you." He meant it completely, prepared to use his influence and resources to ensure this promise was kept. Sophie seemed to sense his sincerity, some of the tension visibly leaving her small shoulders. "Okay," she agreed finally. "But can we check with Miss Diane first? Maybe Mom came back and is looking for us." It was a reasonable request, and Manny nodded immediately. "Absolutely, that's a good place to start." He helped them gather the remaining food into takeout containers. Sophie had already carefully wrapped several pieces of chicken and biscuits, the instinct to save food for later deeply ingrained. As they prepared to leave, Emily suddenly reached out and took Manny's hand, her small fingers curling trustingly around his pasim. The simple gesture of faith nearly undid the boxer's careful composure. The drive to Parkview Apartments was quiet, with Emily falling asleep against her sister's shoulder in the back seat of Manny's car, while his assistant followed in another vehicle. Manny had been careful to ensure everything was above board, calling ahead to the family support service, having his assistant present as a witness, and making sure the KFC manager knew exactly where they were going and why. As they pulled into the parking lot of a worn but tidy apartment complex, Manny could feel Sophie's anxiety increasing. "What if she's not there?" she whispered, not wanting to wake her sister. "What if something bad happened to her?" The fear in her voice was palpable, the same fear Manny had felt as a child when uncertainty loomed. "Then we'll keep looking," he assured her, his voice steady and confident. "I'm not giving up until we find her, and I'm not leaving you and Emily until I know you're safe. That's a promise." He meant every word, though he knew from experience that such situations rarely resolved quickly or easily. Building C was easy to find, its faded letter hanging slightly askew on the brick exterior. As they approached apartment 37, Sophie grew visibly tenser, while Emily stirred awake, sensing the significance of the moment. Before they could knock, a door across the hall opened, and an older woman with kind eyes and hair pulled back in a neat bun stepped out, recognition dawning on her face as she saw the girls. "Sophie, Emily, thank God," she exclaimed, hurrying toward them. "Your mother's been beside herself with worry." The girls' faces transformed with a mixture of shock and hope, Emily immediately breaking into tears of relief. "Mom's here," Sophie asked incredulously. "She's home." The woman, presumably Miss Diane, nodded, then noticed Manny standing behind them. Her eyes widened in shock as she recognized the famous boxer, but to her credit, she focused immediately on what mattered. "She came home last night and found you gone. She's been out searching everywhere. Just got back an hour ago, exhausted and terrified," she cried, dropping to her knees as the girls ran to her, enveloping them both in a fierce embrace. For several moments, there were only tears and whispered reassurances as the family clung to each other. Manny hung back respectfully, giving them space for their reunion, though his presence eventually registered with the mother. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she looked from her daughters to the world-famous boxer standing in her hallway. "I don't understand," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "How?" Sophie quickly explained how they had waited at KFC, how Manny had found them and bought them dinner, how he had promised to help find her. The mother's expression shifted from confusion to overwhelming gratitude. "You helped my daughters when they were alone and afraid," she said, her voice breaking. "I can never repay that." He could see the same strength in the mother that he had observed in Sophie, the determined resilience of someone doing whatever it took to survive. Miss Diane had joined them now, explaining that the mother, whose name was Rachel, had been held overnight at the hospital after collapsing at work from exhaustion and dehydration. Her phone was dead, and they had no emergency contacts on file, Miss Diane explained. By the time she was released and got home, the girls had already left to look for food. The pieces were falling into place now, not a story of abandonment, but of a struggling family caught in a perfect storm of circumstance. A hardworking mother pushed beyond her physical limits, frightened children making decisions based on their limited understanding of the situation, and the simple twist of fate that had placed Manny in that particular KFC at that particular moment. Standing there in the dimly lit hallway, surrounded by the emotional reunion, Manny felt a certainty that this encounter had not been coincidence. Seeing the family's obvious poverty and Rachel's exhaustion, Manny knew his responsibility didn't end with simply returning the girls safely. As the initial emotional reunion calmed, he spoke quietly with Rachel, learning more about their situation, her multiple jobs, the recent eviction notice, the abusive ex-boyfriend she'd finally found the courage to leave. The familiar story of struggle resonated deeply with Manny, echoing his own family's hardships before boxing had changed his life. "I'd like to help, if you'll let me," he told her, careful to frame his offer with respect for her dignity. "Not just today, but in a way that makes a real difference going forward." Rachel hesitated, pride warring with pragmatism, the same battle Manny had seen in Sophie earlier. "We don't need charity," she began, echoing her daughter's words from hours before. Manny smiled gently. "It's not charity," he corrected. "It's community. It's what we do for each other. Someone helped me once, when my family had nothing. Now it's my turn to pass that forward." Manny's team arrived with groceries and necessities. Phone calls were made, arrangements set in motion. Rachel's eviction notice was addressed with a single phone call from Manny to the property management company. Plans were made for longer-term support, educational opportunities for the girls, stable employment connections for Rachel, and a fresh start in a safer apartment in the same school district. Throughout it all, Manny was struck by the dignity with which Rachel received help, her focus entirely on creating stability for her daughters rather than on her own comfort. As evening deepened into night, Emily, now fed, bathed, and dressed in clean pajamas provided by Manny's team, approached the boxer shyly, a small worn book in her hands. "Would you read to us?" she asked, her earlier fear completely replaced by trust. "Mom always reads to us, but she's really tired tonight." Taking the book, a collection of children's stories well loved and falling apart at the binding, Manny sat between the two girls on the small bed they shared in the apartment's only bedroom. As he read about brave knights and clever princesses, about kindness rewarded and courage in the face of dragons, he felt Emily's head gradually grow heavy against his arm, her breathing deepening into sleep. Sophie lasted longer, her analytical mind asking questions about the stories, pointing out plot holes with an intelligence that made Manny smile. But eventually, her eyes too began to close, the safety of being home with her mother and sister allowing her vigilance to finally ease. Carefully, Manny extricated himself, tucking the blanket around both girls before quietly returning to the living room. Rachel was still awake, though barely, her exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Thank you," she said simply, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. "You didn't just help my girls, you gave them hope, showed them that good things can happen, that good people exist." Manny shook his head, unexpectedly moved. "They already knew that," he replied. "They learned it from you." He meant it sincerely in the fierce protection Sophie showed for Emily, in their politeness despite their hunger, in their resilience and quick thinking. He had seen the values their mother had instilled despite their circumstances. "Your daughters are amazing. You've done an incredible job raising them." Rachel's eyes filled with tears at the validation, perhaps the first she'd received in a very long time for her hardest and most important work. As Manny prepared to leave, promising to return the next day to continue helping with their situation, he realized that his own heart felt lighter than it had in months. In trying to help this family, he had received something precious in return, a reminder of why his journey mattered beyond titles and fame. The story of Manny Pacquiao and the two sisters at KFC made headlines, though not through Manny's doing. A customer had recognized him and discreetly recorded part of his interaction with the girls, the video going viral within hours of being posted online. What could have been an invasion of privacy instead became a catalyst for good, as viewers worldwide were moved by the boxing champion's compassion. Donations poured in for Rachel and her daughters, allowing Manny to establish a trust for the girls' education and a foundation to help other families in similar situations. When asked about it in interviews, Manny consistently deflected praise, emphasizing instead the courage and dignity of Sophie, Emily, and their mother. "They're the real champions," he would say, his sincerity evident. "I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." The media attention eventually faded, as it always does, but the connection between Manny and the family remained, not as a celebrity charity case, but as a genuine bond formed in a moment of shared humanity. 6 months later, Manny sat in the audience of Sophie's school talent show, watching proudly as she delivered a powerful speech about resilience and community. Rachel sat beside him, healthier now and working steadily at a job Manny had helped her secure, while Emily bounced excitedly in her seat, counting down the minutes until her own dance performance. The transformation in their lives was remarkable, not just in material circumstances, but in the hope and confidence that now radiated from all three of them. "When I was growing up poor in the Philippines," Manny shared quietly with Rachel as they watched Sophie on stage, "I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would help others the way I wished someone had helped us." Rachel nodded in understanding. "You've changed our lives," she acknowledged, "but you know what means the most to the girls? Not the things you've given us, but the fact that you keep showing up, that you remember their birthdays, that you care about their grades, that you're here tonight." It was a humbling realization for someone whose career had been built on spectacular moments in the ring, that the most meaningful impact he might ever have came not from a championship fight but from a quiet evening in a seat, choosing to notice two children in need. As Sophie concluded her speech, to enthusiastic applause, Manny thought about all the times in his life when the right person had appeared at the right moment, trainers who saw his potential, mentors who guided him, supporters who believed in him when victory seemed impossible. The chain of kindness stretched backward through his life and now forward through Sophie and Emily's, an unbroken line of human connection, more valuable than any championship belt. Years later, when asked what he considered his greatest achievement, Manny Pacquiao would not mention his 8-division world championships, his political career, or his business success. Instead, he would smile and share the story of two little sisters in a KFC and how they taught him the true meaning of strength. "They showed me that real courage isn't about throwing punches or taking hits," he would explain. "It's about facing each day with hope when hope seems impossible. It's about protecting those you love, even when you're just a child yourself." The lesson had transformed his approach to philanthropy. moving from simple charity to meaningful investment in people's potential and dignity. And somewhere in the crowd listening to him speak would often be Sophie and Emily, no longer little girls but accomplished young women, carrying forward in their own lives the legacy of that unexpected evening when a boxing champion sat down at their table and listened to their whispered fears. In the years following their fateful meeting, both Sophie and Emily flourished in ways that exceeded everyone's expectations. Sophie's natural leadership abilities and analytical mind led her to excel academically, eventually earning a scholarship to study law with a focus on family advocacy. Emily's creativity blossomed as she discovered a talent for storytelling. Her experiences transformed into powerful narratives that touched hearts across different media. Their mother Rachel became an essential part of Manny's foundation, her first-hand knowledge of struggle making her uniquely qualified to identify families truly in need and the most effective ways to help them. Together, this unlikely family of choice created ripples of change that extended far beyond their individual stories. And it had all begun with the simple courage of two sisters whispering their truth to a stranger who took the time to listen, in the unlikely setting of a fast food restaurant on what had started as an ordinary evening. What began as a chance encounter became a powerful reminder that genuine connections can form in the most unexpected places, that sometimes the universe conspires to put exactly the right people together at exactly the right moment. For Manny Pacquiao, world champion and global icon, the evening he spent buying chicken for two frightened sisters became a cornerstone memory, a touchstone he would return to whenever fame or fortune threatened to distance him from his core values. Success means nothing if we don't use it to lift others, he often said when mentoring young boxers. The strongest punch I ever threw wasn't in a ring, it was reaching out a hand to someone who needed it. This philosophy, reinforced by his ongoing relationship with Sophie, Emily, and Rachel, shaped the latter part of his career and his legacy beyond boxing. The whispers of two little girls in a KFC had somehow spoken more truth to his heart than the roaring crowds of his greatest victories. The story of Manny and the sisters became something of a modern parable, retold in different forms across various platforms, from motivational speeches to children's books. While some versions emphasized the celebrity element or dramatized certain aspects, the essential truth remained powerful in its simplicity. A moment of human connection had changed multiple lives forever. For Sophie and Emily, the lesson was equally profound, that asking for help required its own kind of courage, that vulnerability could lead to unexpected blessings, that even the darkest circumstances could change in ways they couldn't imagine. As adults, both sisters carried this wisdom into their work with vulnerable populations, creating safe spaces where others could share their own whispered truths and find not judgment but compassion. The cycle of kindness that began that evening continued to expand outward, touching countless lives with each passing year. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Manny organized a private celebration for the family at the very same KFC where it all began. The restaurant had been temporarily closed to the public, the staff sworn to secrecy to prevent a media circus. As they sat at the same corner booth, now adults sharing memories rather than strangers sharing secrets, Emily surprised everyone by presenting Manny with a hand-bound book. Inside were letters from dozens of families who had been helped by the foundation born from their encounter, along with photographs documenting transformed lives. "You didn't just help us that night," Emily said simply, her voice steady with the confidence of the woman she had become. "You started a movement." Manny, not usually given to public displays of emotion, found himself unable to speak for several moments, overwhelmed by the tangible evidence of how far a single act of kindness could reach. Sometimes, the greatest victories, he reflected, came not with championship belts and global acclaim, but in quiet moments of human connection that changed the world, one whispered truth at a time.